I'll steal that. Once again, we have saved the very best for last this morning, and I am pleased to moderate this panel with two good friends. First, I would like to introduce Heather Reams. Heather and I claim kinship. My middle name is Ream, without the S. Doesn't matter to us.
We're Reams together.
We're Reams together. Heather is the executive director for CRESS, that's Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions. They are a right-of-center group working on environment and energy. And if you haven't had a chance to get to know Heather and listen to her, I highly suggest that you get to know her. Heather has chaired Clean Energy National Week since 2017. She's a Western Caucus Foundation Advisory Board member, and she serves on the Board of Directors for American Conservative Coalition. Thank you for being with us today. Hang on just a minute. We'll have you say a few words. Let me introduce Mark Compton, sitting next to me on my right. Besides having a town named after him just to our south.
Straight out of Compton.
Straight out of Compton. He is with AEMA, American Exploration and Mining Association. Interestingly, before his current role, well, he served 25 years, nearly a quarter century with that organization, and then took a turn at serving at Utah's, the president of Utah Mining Association. As such, he was one of my constituents. He told me this morning, reminded me this morning that he had voted for me my first time and not since then, only because he moved out of the district. And we can forgive him for that. Yeah, that's what he says. So I'm really pleased to have both of them with us. Let me have you both take a few minutes. Heather, we'll start with you and share a few remarks. I think we all agree we want to jump into questions as quickly as we can. So Heather, take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be here. When I walked into the reception area there, I looked at one of the books that was by Peter Hannaford, and it was called Quotable Reagan. I worked for, Peter Hannaford was one of the speechwriters for President Reagan when he, actually Governor Reagan. And I worked for him. He was one of the first jobs I had after I left I guess on the Hill, and I worked for him, and he taught me a lot about communications and a lot about Reagan. So it's really an honor to be here. Couple things, just quick thoughts here. With strategic minerals, rare earth minerals, we have a China problem. We have a big China problem. There's a lot of China problems. This is one of them. It's a national security issue. It's a domestic issue. It's everything. Strategic minerals are strategic for a reason. We need them to build just about everything, including all this great technology we have here. Clean energy technologies. About 20% of all the minerals around the world go to clean energy technologies. So if we're going to expand clean energy, we got to think about where we're sourcing our minerals from. Second, we need to do it more domestically. We need to be mining. Senator Daines made a great point about making sure we are mining here in the U.S. We don't. Not nearly enough. And if we do mine here, it's going to be cleaner than anywhere else in the world. Why wouldn't we mine here? So that's another place. And finally, we need to be mining and strategic minerals. If we're going to be all the above, including clean energy, we got to do it. We just have to do it. And it's going to create better jobs, a more prosperous economy, and ultimately energy independence that we know is so important to our strategic advantage of leading the world. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. I'll stop there and turn it over, and we'll go for questions.
Mark?
Thank you, Congressman. Heather, you should actually be doing my job because that was really good. I mean, we all know we're far too reliant on mineral imports. You've all heard the stats from the U.S. Geological Survey. We're 100% import reliant for 17 mineral commodities, greater than 50% reliant for another 29. And it's not because of a lack of domestic resources. I mean, the fact is the U.S. is home to an estimated $6.2 trillion worth of mineral reserves. I think part of the problem is actually that as a society, we just don't give much thought to the origins of the products that we depend on every day. It's kind of like that age-old question of where does milk come from? I mean, we've talked a lot about ag here, and far too often the answer is from the grocery store. And for minerals, far too often the answer actually is from a foreign country, and usually one with far lower environmental and worker protection standards than we enjoy here in the U.S. So, one of the challenges for us, I mean, this, like water, like agriculture, minerals and securing our supply chains is a bipartisan issue, and it has to be. President Biden issued his America's Supply Chain Executive Order shortly after taking office. That called for a review among several sectors of the economy: semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, high-capacity batteries, and critical minerals. And we were really encouraged by that. One of the notable things, I think, from that executive order was it called for continued work pursuant to President Trump's order on critical minerals. Now, frankly, I didn't think the Biden administration would agree with anything that the Trump administration did. So to include that in there, I think, was pretty significant. But the challenge that the domestic industry is facing is that recognition of the supply chain issues runs counter to actions actually being taken by the administration and, unfortunately, some in Congress to restrict access to mineral deposits. And if we don't have the access, it's not going to happen. Most of the mining does take place in the western U.S., hard rock mining, and most of that is on federal public land. So maintaining that access and then being able to permit projects in a timely manner is critical. Heather talked about the burgeoning demand with conversion to clean energy. Just consider the EV revolution for a second. President Biden has promised to convert the entire U.S. government fleet to EVs by 2030. That's about 640,000 vehicles. For Tesla to get, and this is coming from them, for them to get to their desired production level, Tesla alone would require today's entire worldwide supply of lithium-ion batteries. So this is just the U.S. government fleet and one automaker, and we don't have anywhere near what we need. So, considering the magnitude of the minerals needed to get to a 100% EV market, those numbers are just staggering, and obviously cannot be ignored. So there's all kinds of policy issues that we could get into, but I think, Congressman, let's just open it up to questions and have a discussion.
All right, Debbie, we're going to go to you first. Let me ask just a first question, if I may. I represent a county. It's called Carbon County. It won't surprise any of you that they rely heavily on extraction. And they have been villainized in really the worst of ways, right? These are good men and women who for decades have sacrificed their health, their safety, so that our good friends on the East Coast could flip a switch and get to 70 degrees. Mark, could you just define in a very short synopsis the difference of what happens when something is mined here in the United States, the standards, the safety, right, all of those things, the environmental standards versus when something is mined in China. Give us a contrast, if you would, on that. And then, Heather, I'll let you think about this for a little bit. You are a master at communications, right? Why do we care, right? And particularly in a way, if I were to tell my neighbor who just isn't paying attention to this why we should care, why do we care about this? Mark, you first.
Yeah, so, the difference in mining it here and pretty much any other place in the world, it really hits to why we need a secure domestic supply chain, because we do have the best environmental protection and worker health and safety laws in the world. We do it cleaner and better here than anywhere. And, that really sets us apart from other countries that have less stringent requirements or, in some cases, no requirements at all. You've all heard of the child labor mining cobalt in the Congo. But, so to rely on foreign countries, even our allies in some cases, it's a misguided effort.
Thank you, Heather.
Why should we care? I said China. So many reasons because of China. And the second one, Russia. We're here, thinking about Reagan. I grew up in the 80s. He was my president. He wasn't the first one I voted for because I wasn't old enough to vote by just a couple of months. But I was a Cold War kid. It scared the shit out of me, thinking about the day after and what would happen if the United States wasn't a global leader in everything and everything that's good. China, they're not our friends. They're liars. They're pollutants. They steal our IP. They give us the Wuhan virus. I mean, these are not good people in terms of a country. People, I'm sure, are fine, but the government, it's terrible. Russia, somehow it's okay to have the Nord Stream pipeline, but we can't have a pipeline coming out of Canada. We've got to think about our energy independence. We've got to think about how we're ensuring that we have every bit of energy we can to manufacture, to build, to lead in a democratized world and not socialism. I mean, that's really where it's about internationally and thinking about that. You go to the White House, at least when I went to the Trump White House, it's the first thing they talked about. I'm talking about climate change. I'm talking about reducing emissions. And like, what about the geopolitics? We can't ignore it. I think the supply chain issues, China, not only are we mining them, but we're processing them. We mine them here, we're still processing them in China. We've got some serious problems we need to solve here, and they are Western issues. So why should we care? If you're an American and you want America to lead, you care.
You need to care. Debbie?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both, Mark and Heather, for being involved in this forum. But I guess I agree with you that most people do not realize where our products, where the minerals come from. They don't realize where energy comes from when they turn on the lights. And so I really think we need a PR plan, quite frankly, to educate the public so that they'll be on our side. And so my question is, since you're involved with the industries, are they willing to invest in a PR campaign plan, which Congress members like myself put stuff out on social media? But I really think we need to get together with a concerted effort plan and put the resources, finances behind it, and we will help. So since you have industry that you deal with, have they talked about this?
Absolutely, they've talked about it and talked about it. And I mean, but in seriousness, I mean, yeah, I mean, we've had discussions about, you know, what's it going to take for us to get a Super Bowl ad? I mean, Jamie, you guys had that "And God Made a Farmer" commercial, yeah, but that was effective. Hugely effective. We do need to do something similar to that. It doesn't necessarily need to be a Super Bowl ad, but we've tried for, I think, far too long to do it on the cheap, and it's time that as an industry we do step up and tell our story better.
It feels.
How do Congress members get you guys to invest in this? Because otherwise you're going to lose your businesses. We're going to lose our country.
I don't know that Congress can get us to do that. I mean, I guess you could appropriate some money, but but there is a, you know, the way we communicate obviously has changed. You know, social media is so huge, and yes, this is part of doing it on the cheap, but it is effective in getting that message out. So, you know, partnering, all of us in this room, you know, follow each other on social media, share content, share talking points, talk to your neighbors. You know, people aren't going to necessarily listen to industry when we tell them you need mining, you know, and make that connection between mining and their lifestyle and standard of living. But they'll listen to you, you know, or they'll listen to you.
So we're gonna keep moving,
sorry.
Debbie. Really good point, Debbie. And I think all of us also should kind of look at ourselves and see what we can do to spread this message. It feels to me like the emperor's got no clothes, and somebody's got to point that out, right? Jay?
So I'd like to follow on to Debbie's question about PR, because the Natural Resources Committee recently had a hearing on preventing the operation of the Resolution copper mine in Arizona, which would be the largest copper mine in the U.S. Statistics from that hearing was that we need to quadruple copper production worldwide if we're going to convert 100% of our motor vehicle fleet to electric vehicles, quadruple. And yet, the purpose of the hearing was to shut down the operation of this mine. And we heard witness after witness about Native Americans, how their burial grounds and ancestral habitats, and the local communities and the activists and the Sierra Club, and just one mayor saying, "Hey, wait, what about the jobs?" Just a couple days ago, I was in Conglomerate Mesa in my own district, where the Sierra Club is trying to shut down exploration on the Conglomerate Mesa gold mine. So the question is, how do we combat this? Because if we do it mine by mine by mine, the local activists are always going to win.
Heather?
Yeah, I have some thoughts here. I think this issue, I work on a lot of environmental climate issues, energy issues from a right of center approach. There's not a lot of us walking around thinking about this. And 5 years ago, it was a really lonely place, and more we're recognizing, how do we be more and show and demonstrate as Republicans we're more environmentally conscious. We've always been environmentally conscious, but how do we demonstrate that more? I think the issue on strategic minerals is actually such a winner for Republicans for so many ways. I think Congressman Gosar's bill and Congressman Walz's bill is a fantastic start. I think we double, triple, quadruple down on bills like that for a number of reasons, and they match our principles as conservatives as well. But I think we need more. We need to talk about it. We need Kevin McCarthy talking about it. We need leaders and the ranking members talking about it, calling out the hypocrisy. This issue divides the environmentalists. It divides Democrats. You want EVs? How are you going to make them happen? How are you going to make them? Not here. If you're not going to mine here. I mean, if you look at what Gina McCarthy said, she said we should be mining all over the world for this stuff. There may not be enough in the world to mine. We'll have to go to the moon to go get this, or maybe like catch Haley's comet. I don't know, but we don't have enough. So what are we going to do? Call them out on that.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so just to tag on to that too, I mean, you're completely right about the legislation and the legislative effort, and there are some good bills out there. One thing I do want to make sure we watch, though, is when we talk about critical and strategic minerals, too often that gets defined as the 35 minerals that are on the USGS list right now. And, folks need to understand a lot of those minerals are only mined as byproducts of a host mineral, like copper. So, getting to some, because copper is not even considered a critical mineral, but getting to some of those critical minerals, we need copper mines first.
Good.
So.
We're going to go Ken, Doug, and then if nobody, and then Gary here next.
There's only one mine in the United States that's doing rare earth. Actually, it's in Jay's district. It's Mountain Pass Mine. It used to be called Molycorp. I had some experience with that. And from a national security perspective, the Chinese were using cutouts to try to acquire Molycorp, now called Mountain Pass, and then basically shut down that mine in order to make sure that they controlled that critical resource. At the same time, they own all the processing for, as you know, on rare earth in China, and we have no alloying. We don't have any facilities to finish up the product here in the United States presently. And the problem is a lot of these companies cannot get financing because they're afraid that China will come in, subsidize that industry, undercut it, and bankrupt those operations. So I hate to say this from a conservative or Republican perspective, but we may have to come in and guarantee a certain price level or something to allow for those companies to survive and for them to continue to expand and look for additional mineral resources in the United States. I just wanted your comment on that.
Good. Great point.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Congressman. And I think ultimately it may require some financing or financial guarantees. From Congress. I think that is something that Congress could look at because it is a national security issue.
Agreed. Also, like the loan back guarantees from the government, I think, if not subsidizing in some way, incenting the market, giving signals that America's open for business, the government's going to put some money towards it. There's some studies that show for every dollar invested in these types of, and I'm not specific to mining, but just in technology alone, the DOE, it was like for every $1 the government spent, it was $22 in private dollars that followed to give us technologies like fracking, for instance. So there's an appropriate role for government, but I think the national security piece is really going to be our leading principle there.
Very good. Doug?
Thank you. There's several parallel conversations that need to be had on all this critical minerals, power generation, water storage, this whole climate change nonsense. You know, we call CO2 greenhouse gas. That's just a lie, okay? Now, methane gas and some of those other trace things, sure, those are greenhouse. CO2 is a carbon county, right? You know, so we have to push back on the lies here. And what I'm afraid of is that even some of the direction of our conference might be playing a little too much cozy with climate change, okay? And as tied to CO2. This is not real, folks. This is very similar to what Dr. Fauci and this whole gang has been doing on this COVID business. So we have to talk about, and to kind of on Debbie's question, I see natural gas out there promoting themselves from the miracle of hydraulic fracturing, right? Made that energy so cheap that we could start exporting it. Years ago in California, we were talking about trying to make ports to import liquefied LNG from other countries, right? And so we can be pushing this stuff out. So there, and the stats I've seen on if we do this electric car route. Now I have a 1993 Ford Lightning pickup that actually uses gas. It's fast, okay? And then the ones that came out, Richard had one. He had the supercharged one that came out about 2000. That's the real Lightning pickup, amigo. Well, this battery deal. I don't want to be left between Richard and Chico's. But the amount of minerals we're going to have to extract. I saw a stat a while back that England goes 100% electric cars along with California by whatever year their silly goal is. There's not enough material we can extract with the existing mines. We have to quadruple to do this stuff. This is not a reality that we're dealing with. You're right. Just about every other floor speech on the House floor is about climate change, climate change. This is a religious mantra for the Democrats. We can't fall into this crap, okay? We're going to enslave ourselves. We're going to export everything to China. So I guess the messaging is, it's got to come first from us because we're the elected people that can do it. It doesn't per se cost us money. Or either might cost their election. But we're going to play into a lie if we don't get a handle on this. Anybody remember the stat a minute ago? How much of our atmosphere is CO2? What percentage? 0.04. The increase of that's a freaking rounding error. The CO2 game, we're going to be big trouble. And the other side is running over us with that. We can never out-Democrat the Democrats on environment and these other things. We have to go with what's truthful on this or Fauci or anything else, because people are going to be looking to us in 2022 and 2024 for truth and what actually works for them. So we do have people from natural gas and others that they pop out there and talk about what's real, and they got the clever big signs in the airport you walk through. It shows the windmill sitting there. It's unstoppable. The one by Corning stopped all the time. The damn windmill hardly ever runs. So we got to get real on this stuff. I appreciate this panel because we got to be extracting these products in my state, in your state, not importing home. So I don't really have, I guess, a question for it other than we got to dig down tight, hard, conference industry, and back you, and not be drawn into the false arguments that the Democrats, the media, the left. It's just a big, constant mantra, day after day, on climate change. You saw the CNN guy who they got on hidden cameras saying, oh, first it was take down Trump, and when we get him out, then we're going to push climate change day in, day out. Okay? We can't be part of the lie.
Thank you, Doug. While that mic works its way over to Gary, I think it's going in and out too, so use your outside voice, Gary, real big and loud. Doug, certainly an area where Republicans should unite and be on the offensive on this, because we can get the far left environmentalists on their heels on this issue. that should unite the conference alone right there.
Congress, could I
Yes,
just
sir.
real quick
Yeah.
on that too, because one of the talking points you'll hear from the left is, well, we just need to recycle more, and recycling, it's important, and we do need to recycle more, but it's not going to get us there, even without going 100% EV. It's not going to get us close. The International Energy Agency just released a report last month, and they noted that by 2040, if you're recycling all the spent batteries, it's going to produce about 10% of what we're going to need to replace them. So recycling is just not going to get
And
us there.
recycling is also very expensive
Yeah.
at this time, too.
Thank you.
All right. I'm on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis along with Garrett Graves, and we just had a roundtable, which is interesting because something in the 2 years and 5 months that we've had this Select Committee, it's the first time we've had it, and it was about the fact that you cannot build a renewable electric grid without the rare earth metals, without these minerals. And part of our conversation had to do with the fact that right now China is pretty much dependent on U.S. sea power to protect sea lanes because 70% of their oil is shipped in, over 45% of their natural gas. They depend on us. If we go to a completely renewable power grid, we will be dependent on China. Completely flips the strategic advantage to the Chinese. So we had this roundtable, and they have this discussion about the fact that we have got to do this. And there's an opening now with these folks because reality has started to kick in that we have to have these. And some of the things that we're talking about, first of all, is more mining. We can't do it without more mining. But they're also talking about recovering these minerals from mine tailings and also from coal ash, which I'm all for that. That's one of these in the coal ash pond deal where you solve two problems at one time. But the other thing is I've been talking with Consul General from Canada. And Canada is in a major dispute with China right now. There's a Canadian citizen being held by the Chinese. And we've started discussions about forming a North America compact on strategic minerals, which is, I think we're going to have to think outside the box and not just the United States, because all of the West depends on strategic minerals from other parts of the world, and 80% of them come from China. So I just want to tell you there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here. And one other little point on this is when we start talking about the permitting, as I like to point out, if we've got 10 years to save the planet, we can't even get the permits done, the
That's
paperwork
right.
done in 10 years, okay? And I asked one of the Democrat witness, the expert, if in order to build this renewable grid and have all these rare earth metals and minerals, would they be willing to cross rivers and wetlands and sensitive environments? And they said yes. Well, that's really bad news for the lesser prairie chicken. Okay, so there's an opening here because reality's starting to kick in on these things, and to Ken's point about the competition, that how China is government subsidized and they'll come in and try to shut these things down. We've got to talk about how we protect these industries so that we can produce these metals, and we've got what we need in North America, and I even think it ought to extend to Central America. I yield back.
Gary, thank you. I regret. I know there's others that would make comments. Darrell's given me that eye. I think we can all see from this conversation we need to have more of this conversation. These have been great panelists. Thank you for just barely starting this. Darrell, I'll turn over the mic as long as you promise to have more conversations like this in upcoming meetings.
I think we will. This is great. Thank you, panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Congress.